What is up YouTube, and welcome back to another RiftGuides WildRift video. It's time for another tier list, and we don't have that many changes, but we have a few comments to make about current builds that are ongoing, current things that are happening, and other potential meta changes that are on the horizon. So let's talk about this really quickly. Let's start with the Baron lane. Okay, for the Baron lane, nothing much has changed. We have barely any movements in tiers here. All the champions within the S tier are still vastly superior, but there are a few things we have to talk about when it comes to easy execution. So within the S tier, or even the pick of the patch Fiora, all these champions are reasonably hard to play compared to other champions, such as, for example, Sunfire Wukong. Sunfire Wukong is super easy to execute, allows you for plenty of errors, and is just always useful in the sense of having crowd control for teamfights. Other champions simply do not provide this or need to be played in a certain way to snowball the game. Let's take, for example, Jace. If you lose lane as Jace, life is going to be tough unless you have some interesting scaling route, and then life is literally impossible. The same goes for Warwick. Warwick is a lane-domineering champion who wants to just put you into the ground, play around the waves, dive you, and then snowball the game with the power or the benefit of a second ability, going around the map super fast, or going for dives, securing it with their jungle. If these things don't work out for them, their value drops significantly. There's also a rise in popularity with a weird Rumble tank build, completely removing all the downsides of Rumble in a sense of having to pay attention to how you play the champion, in a sense of I'm relatively squishy, I need to pay attention to my heat management, whereas the tank build is primarily focused on you just spamming your second ability since it has a bonus HP scaling. What was it, max HP scaling? One or the other, bonus HP or maximum HP scaling. So you just stack HP items that also have burn effects like Sunfire and Zeke's, and then you just spam your second ability and play around your overheat. So you just hit people in the head with the bonus damage. That's literally it. That's how it functions. And because WildRift has so much room for error all the time, or you have so much room for error all the time because you can do so many things wrong due to mobile controls and overall the level not being so high, these easy to execute champions and certain playstyles just feel superior in so many ways because the other ones require delicate choices, wave management, and other strategies you have to employ. For the A tier, again, making it very clear, the S tier is meta, the A tier is off meta, and the B tier is something you should stay away from. Now, let's briefly talk about the tanks here. There's one thing I want to mention, like you can put Graga's tank into the S tier as well if you truly want to. It's impossible to break, has decent damage, and can be really well played around cooldowns. If you run phase rush, it is. Other champions within the tank tier are just super annoying as well. The recent addition to the roster, making him even more powerful, is Malphite. What did Riot do? Riot made the choice to put Malphite into a position in which he is even better than he already was, but Malphite previously was mainly into certain team compositions, so physical damage, or auto attackers, melees. Now they gave him a lot of extra AD and more, I think it was more damage on E, to make it even better in these scenarios where he was already OP, because it's a conditional pick, and they make them even better in a blind pick scenario. Obviously, you should never blind pick Malphite, but he got a lot better with that one. Champions that are flying under the radar to this day still are Nasus, because you still require somewhat of an understanding when to teleport. Ornn, super high value, especially if you play dual queue with the jungle, since you provide them with tempo due to allowing them to craft. Shen, having these map plays, but being a supportive champion. Garen, just super annoying to deal with. You just cannot break him unless you're significantly better than him. And needless to say, we have Poppy. Poppy is still the biggest abomination here and wins against every single champion on the carry tier, at least early game. Like, you can just stat check them, beat them up, and then, with the jungle's help, completely put them into the ground. But again, this requires coordination, and Poppy doesn't scale well into the late game. She just turns into a super tank and is a CC bot. And by the way, check out my partners in the description below. He's also a screen of the current offer. Stop overpaying for skins in WildRift and save big time. Anyways, let's move over to the jungle tier list. For the jungle tier list, what adjustments did I do? So for the champion nerfs, for example, you have an Italy nerf. The champion is obviously weaker than before, but is still within the S tier, so meta. Something I've adjusted as well is putting Gnar 1 tier down and Hecarim 1 tier up due to bot laners never learning what to do and how to play, so Hecarim always ends up getting fed, which is terrible. The champion still suffers very much into all of the other meta champions that are really broken, like Viego, Riven, I think Lee Sin. and obviously Aatrox, because these champions are just superior in any possible way. But now I want to differentiate between champions that are easy to play and champions that are very difficult to pilot in direct comparison. For a good player, saying champions like Viego being hard to play is basically like insulting them. So champions that are more difficult to play for the normal player base, like Viego, Riven, Lee, and Aatrox, because there's certain follow things they have to do, which is also something that people struggle with the most when it comes to jungle, usually show less good results for only decent players or bad players, because these champions have specific things they have to like watch out for. Number one, these champions hyperscale with gold to a degree that is unbelievably insane. Number two, reset nature. Understanding when to go in, even if the numerical disadvantage is like oppressing, like you're just 1v5, but you can still outplay it due to how your champion functions, because you just one-shot people. And these kind of things. Other champions are way easier to pilot. For example, Kha'Zix is definitely easier to pilot. Vi is probably the biggest NPC-friendly champion that exists because of how easy this champion is and how much damage she does and how overstat she is in direct comparison. Champions that require really delicate gameplay would be, for example, Nidalee and Kindred. These two champions are very, very good if you understand why and when to pick them. Other champions that also require really well understanding what to do would be, for example, Kayn. But all things come down to one certain aspect that people completely forget when it comes to WildRift jungle. They simply don't farm. They go for dragons, waste their time instead of just going for GPM maxing and actually carrying the game, because the champions have the capabilities of carrying the game. If you inspect any of your jungles in the games you're playing, you will notice that the average gold income is probably around 700 to 800, maybe. And that is very, very little, because even if you mainly focus on farming and only do plays that are very good for you, you can easily, if you just pay attention to the map, end up around 1000 gold per minute. I've shown this on stream for, I think, more than 100 games in sequence, going for Challenger and Jungle, with like, I think it was 80-something% win rate on not a fresh account. That is very important, not a fresh account, just to showcase how it is possible. And this is something you have to keep in mind, because people still mistake this game for a true team game or where objectives matter, when only a few select objectives truly matter. And therefore, I'd love you to watch the Dragons Are Worthless video, because it will really change the way you view the game, because it is not as much as a team game and objective-based game as you believe it is. It's more like a one-man show if you play jungle. Okay, as for the A tier, the Evelyn boss are not saving a champion against meta champions. It's more about her mid-game gold generation, as well as giving us some extra little damage on her most used spell. For the tank champions, these champions are primarily used for or by people who do not really want to be efficient when it comes to jungle clearing, because they are completely able to ignore one certain aspect of the game by just completely dipping out of farming. They just gank, and do just the minimal amount of farming and just focus on terrorizing the map. That is their primary goal. And then they play around their fat teammates to assist them. This is a playstyle that some people have and some people like, which I respect. The problem with this playstyle, though, is the moment you get into territory where people are actually paying attention, which in WildRift, needless to say, barely exists, so you get away with this to the highest rank in both game modes, don't get me wrong. But if you happen to play into quote-unquote humans, then you might get punished to a degree that there's just no fun in playing anymore. But that is something that rarely happens, so you'll get away with it, but keep in mind, there's so much more you can always do. But again, S tier is the meta, A tier off meta, and pick of the patch is just something I would recommend you look into. Now for the mid lane. So again, here we don't have really any changes. Something we have to talk about that is also similar to the jungle department is the newly changed BT. Briefly talking about jungle again, some junglers now are capable of picking up BT because it lost its lifeline passive, and now you can just pair it up with Sterox. Something that you have to keep in mind. But now for mid lane. Aurora is still by far the best mid laner. Something that got nerfed in the recent patches once were Zoe and Morgana, but these nerfs really don't change much about their placement here. So all champions within the S tier are still vastly superior to any champion within the A tier. That is something I just want to really establish here. Many people will be like, but Swain is so broken. Yes, Swain is broken if, condition number one, he gets fed. Condition number 2, there's 0 CC on your team and he's allowed to just freely run into you. Condition C, how is he even supposed to run into you? Like, there needs, like, he doesn't just magically appear there. Like, there needs to be so many conditions fulfilled for him to actually be useful. And that is something you have to really, really, really keep in mind when you view champions as being broken, because you have to look at them at early stages with the lane, early mid game, late game, like how do they do damage, how are they volatile, like how can they die, all of these things. Okay, for the assassin tier, it's still literally the same. Only a few notable mentions or noteworthy mentions here are fleet footwork adjustments. Obviously, nerfing fleet footwork makes you heal less on minions, which is a direct nerf to Echo, and obviously Akali, since both of these were the primary users for mid lane when it comes to sustaining. Something, however, that doesn't change, at least for Echo, is the empowered or at least increased attack speed for the auto attack, which helps him proc his passive faster. What you can do though is you can pivot away from that one if you truly want to and still pick up Electrocute. Or Conqueror, depending on the matchup, at least for Akali, which in mid lane isn't something you should look into because most of you play against mages, but if you play into a bruiser for whatever reason and you already know it, you should pick up Conqueror. Now, for Fleet, you can still run it, but you have to keep in mind it's less powerful than before. It's more functional about the auto attack, so that's really, really, really important. Within the A tier, again, no real changes. Now for the other tier and the Bloodthirster changes. For the Bloodthirster changes, there are a few things we have to talk about. Since Bloodthirster previously had attack speed, it was obviously the premier choice for Yasuo and Yone. Now we have to think about something else. We have to debate, like, how much attack speed do we need to reach old attack speed goals, because we truly dislike not having enough attack speed on these champions. I believe we will still run Bloodthirster as our first item, very, very certain, but we'll just have to look into when we buy another dagger. For the runes, we'll simply go for Green main, which is Resolve main, which is Nullifying Orb, Second Wind, and then obviously, what is it called, Perseverance. And for the second tree, we would be looking into Alacrity. Now with this, plus Berserker Grease, we have a good amount of attack speed, but we still need to supplement it even more to reach to reach the lowest cooldown on our abilities, which for Yasuo is Q, and for Yone it was W and Q. So from my perspective, we are going to see a change in builds after they build their core items, other than changing their core items entirely. I do not think we will go to Blade, because Blade simply doesn't fit the current style of the game, because you just want so much upfront burst, and Blade just doesn't even come close to the damage you would be dealing if you were going full crit. For the A tier, I can't really say that there are any changes, everything is still the same. Timothy got nerfed, but he was already not meta, so I wouldn't see that as a reason though to put him into the B tier. The B tier is for champions that are really, really, well, not on the bright side of WildRift. For the AD carry side, however, we have one little change. So first off, the pick of the patch still remains Lucian, still by far the best champion you can pick there as a powerhouse to stomp lane. The nerfs are really like completely irrelevant. An underrated champion that people believe is weak now would be Corki, which is untrue. Another champion is completely underrated would be Misfortune and Ezreal. Again, all the champions within S tier are vastly superior due to different reasons. For example, better early game, better laning phases, better scaling, better late game. And other champions, for example, in the A tier have terrible early game, terrible mid game, and only have good late game. For example, Nyla. For example, Sivir, really bad early game. Caitlyn would have a decent early game, but a really, really bad mid-game slump because she doesn't really do damage at that point. Kai'Sa is dependent on people being really bad, and people are running a really bad build nowadays for no reason, like the crit build. I really don't understand why you're nerfing your champion for zero reason, but it is what it is. Twitch is the same. Terrible early game, terrible mid-game outside of stealth roams, but a really good late game. If he has actually some peel because he's very immobile. Tristana, probably the best late game scaling here, but a really, really, really terrible early game slump. Probably the best champion within the A tier, honestly. And if there's one mention that we have to make, it's about Kalista. The changes to Kalista really gave her back some power she lost in the past. But she still will struggle finding a good place in the meta or reaching people. Because the champion, again, fundamentally, you can think of her like Swain. If this champion cannot get locked down, it seems so unbelievably broken because it just hits you and hits you and hits you and chases you at the same time, you just can't catch it. But if there's proper lockdown, it's impossible to play. Like, she's too short range. The next thing is we have to keep in mind is that people really don't understand how Kalista functions. Kalista is a very strong level 1 champion due to like the execute mechanic or the rent mechanic on her third ability, which allows her to deal extra damage depending on how many autos she threw into the enemy champions. So that is something very good for early game all-ins. But outside of that, the Vayne nerfs, like, come on, bro, it's Vayne. This champion was dead before, I don't know, we're killing it even more, I guess. It's just China and Enchanters, and bot lane is actually being terrible. We've analyzed enough bot lane laning phases to understand the level that we see in the most games, and since it's balanced around percentages and the majority of players, it's quite obvious to see why this happens. Now for mages, the best possible blind pick you have here in the bot lane would probably be Ziggs, and the only suffering you would encounter would be going for Boots of Mana. Again, mages are primarily locked to not playing the game until they have Boots of Mana. Once they have Boots of Mana, and obviously related to that, access to their basic abilities, like level 5, level 6, which you roughly have when you get your boots, they can finally clear wave all the time. The problem, however, though, is if you ever watch competitive games, is that the enemy team, if they don't have a mage and an AD carry, will brute force invades, dives, because you can't defend yourself at that time yet. In solo queue, however, that just simply doesn't happen, so you can just relax, lean back, enjoy, and have a beautiful time. Last but not least, we have to talk about the supports. Again, not really any changes, it's WildRift. You can basically always look at the list and look at the best performing champions, like the suggested pick of the patch, as well as the meta champions within the S tier, and you can always pick them and barely do anything wrong if you have like a slight understanding, which means, for example, if you truly know how to play the game, truly know how to position, etc., you're obviously performing way better with full AP Karma than with a full Enchanter type. Because Enchanter builds, or generally like tank Enchanter builds, allow you so much more errors. Like, you can make so many mistakes and don't get punished, but if you're full AP, you're very squishy, and if you make a mistake, you just die. So, given the average level of play, it's obviously more common to make these mistakes constantly, because obviously if you wouldn't make these mistakes, you would be very, very high in elo, because that is making such a huge difference. That's something you have to keep in mind. So for example, for the support side, a champion that's super easy to pilot on, like, literally one of the easiest champions is Nautilus. However, people don't really play the champion for whatever reason, because the gameplay loop is very simple in a sense of you just flash on enemy on cooldown. Literally on cooldown. You take Axe Flash and you flash on cooldown. That's how the game plays. On the flip side, you have Rakan that cannot really play lane because he's a very weak laner, but he's very good the moment he has access to his ultimate, the quickness. And therefore you have huge discrepancies in win rate and overall like performance, and it's even worse if you compare these engage type champions with enchanter type champions, because engage champions have responsibilities, which support champions on the protect tier or enchanter tier don't really have. Melio, still the most annoying champion to face, way too much range, especially powerful paired up with any of the super long-ranged AD carries from the AD carry list, which are normally placed in the A tier. But the most toxic combo would be Lucian Melio, since Melio's second ability constantly refreshes with every single tick, Lucian's other passive giving him bonus magic damage on every single hit he does. For the carry tier, we have El Bardo still as the absolute king here, because he just does way too much damage. Even after all the nerfs to different, to his level 1 Q, 30 damage loss, to Nash's Tooth, to Boost of Mana, the champion still does way too much damage and has way too much potential to outplay. I really hope that we see the Zara rework anytime soon. I assume it will be out for 7.0, but I don't know, I can't make any promises, but I really hope to see that one. And that's it for today's video. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and obviously don't forget to check out my partners in the description below, and have a beautiful day.